Hi there. Let's go ahead and get started. My name is Laura Milner, and I'm the very proud Dean of the College of Business Administration. Pleased to welcome you to the second in our First Friday Executive Speaker Series. And my job today will be to introduce Dennis Vogel, who's the CEO of Citizens State Bank, or Citizens Bank, because he's sponsoring this series. And we are so pleased that we have a sponsor. A lot of people would not, a lot of companies would not be that invested in us that they would support us fiscally and financially and with student jobs. So the reason I'm telling you about student jobs is because after this is a reception where Dennis is clearly trolling. He is interested in speaking to interesting students who want careers in finance and banking. Eric Jungbluth will also be there today, our today's speaker. So I encourage you. We also have Bob Allen, who's from the chair. We also have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 faculty who will also be there. So this is your time not to just mingle with each other, but to mingle with them as well, and to hopefully get farther along on your career path. One of the things we're doing with this First Friday series, and I want to applaud you for showing up on a really nice Friday. Really? We know the weather's nice out there. But part of the reason we're doing this is to create an intimate atmosphere, not something that's with other big speakers where you have 600 of your closest friends. We do want you to come to the reception and mix it up, and we do want to have a small group. All right. So with no further ado, let me tell you a little more about Dennis. Now, Dennis has been the CEO. Understand that Citizens Bank is one of the top 100 community banks in the country. The reason I like Dennis and Citizens Bank, State Bank, is because they're the happiest bank on earth. They literally are participating in a study that goes on every week about morale in their banking system. Financial companies across the country are doing this. And so they want to make sure, and if you've ever been, how many of you have been to Citizens State Bank? Any of you? All right, one of you. We do. We do. Only because when you walk into his bank, it's got a very different vibe. It's got a cool vibe. It's not your ordinary bank. And Dennis will be the first to tell you that those people who come and work fresh out of the university for him will have a hard transition to another bank. And the same thing, for those people who have gone and gotten enculturated at another bank, will have a hard time coming to be employed at his bank. Why? Because his culture is so different, and it's so upbeat, and it's so fun. It's not like banking you've ever seen before. So I highly recommend that you talk to Dennis, but at least go visit Citizens State Bank just to get something different. All right, so he began his banking career after he graduated from UWL in finance in 1997, followed by his MBA in 2002. He's been very active in many for-profit ventures in the area. He's also been very active in boards in the area, but he started being active even as a student. He was very involved with the AMA, American Marketing Association student organization, and also the Financial Management Association as well. And he's been involved with the Silver Eagles Board of Directors, which I don't know if you know what the Silver Eagles are, but the Silver Eagles are actually the CBA branded alumni group. So we have not just regular alumni, we have a branded alumni group. So it's the Silver Eagles. And just a little more about them. It used to be when they first started, you had to be out for 25 years before you could be a part of them. They've now recognized that that's a mistake because they lose you for 25 years. So now you can join them as a current member, as a current student, or right after graduation as well. And then let's see. And so he tries to always hire outstanding UWL students. So with no further ado, here's Dennis Vogel. Here, you want to?
I don't need a microphone. You probably can hear me, right? You want me to have a mic? All right. I'm happy to report that, again, I love hiring UWL students. That last Monday, we actually had 3 UWL students starting, and one of those was in this session last month. So come and network afterwards. So also just a friendly reminder, again, if you could, please pull your cell phones out and turn those off if you have not. All right. Well, Citizens is once again excited to partner with the CBA to bring one of our many very successful UWL alums back to campus. Today we're very fortunate to bring the former CEO of CPG International back to campus, Eric Jungbluth. Now, Eric's resume is very impressive. Prior to holding the CEO position of CPG from 2008 to 2016, a period where he increased sales from $260 million to $625 million. He held several positions to include president of the Hahn Corporation, president at Allsteel, senior roles at Moen, and various leadership roles at Kirsch and Warner Lambert. In addition to that, which is not in his bio, I found out actually it started very young here in La Crosse on the south side at Shopko, understanding college, working there full time. So from the ground up, I can relate to that, flipping burgers and waiting tables myself. Eric is originally from the Crescent, which I did not know that until yesterday, so he's actually really coming home. And now resides in the Chicago area with his wife, Kristen. I'd like to have Kristen stand. Let's give her props. And the reason I do that, again, I've just met them, but I know what it's like, and you got to have a very strong person to do this with, and obviously she's probably been a big part of your success. And also I was observing that actually you live in Chicago, but you are not a Cubs fan. No. I find that very interesting. Oh, Wisconsin, not the Twins, huh? So, now technically Eric is retired, however, he actually works for his wife as the VP of Household, managing their 2 children and 2 dogs. In addition to all those activities, Eric and Kristen are very philanthropic, involved in education and giving back to those in needs. So we're very fortunate to have people like this in this world, and we need more people like this. And again, I've just met them, but I did some other research, and they're just great quality people, and that's what this world needs. Hardworking people that don't take it for granted, work from the ground up, and now we're giving back to their community. So I think we're very fortunate to call Eric a UWL alum. Let's give him a warm welcome.
All right. Thank you, Dennis. Good afternoon. Thanks for coming on a, as Laura said, a wonderful Friday afternoon. And taking time to, especially in my world, taking time to learn a little bit about the manufacturing side and kind of my career and its progression. And I'm still a huge believer in manufacturing. That's obviously where I spent my career. I know it's not quite as sexy as it once was, but it is rebounding in the U.S. And I think it provides a great opportunity for everybody in this room. So a little bit about myself. Dennis stole a little bit of my thunder. Grew up in La Crescent. Started working at Shopko actually on Mormon Cooley Road when I was in 10th grade, and then started doing that full-time towards the tail end of high school, and then worked full-time all the way through college. And that's how I was able to pay for my college. My parents did not have the wherewithal or means to support me with my education. Wonderful parents, great upbringing, but had to earn it. A little bit about me. I am not the type of person or CEO that had a target to become CEO. I never said as I was going along in my career or as I was working at Shopko that I'm going to be a CEO someday. A number of people do that. That was never me. So I was always the type of person that just thrived on the next challenge, the next learning. I was always very much a results-oriented person, very dedicated to what I did professionally, and hopefully Kristen would say personally. But that was more kind of my style. I'd like to think over the years, as I've achieved success well beyond what I thought I would, that I've stayed pretty humble. That's tough to do, and I'm certain I've got a bit of ego like anybody does, but I like to think that I've stayed humble and could relate to anybody, whether it's the people working at an hourly rate in our facilities or you name it, anybody. So that's a little bit about me. It's a little bit about how I'm wired. A little bit of background. I won't spend too much time on this, but graduated in 1985. By the way, I think you're going to a wonderful school. I can't say enough good things about UWL. Hopefully all of you believe that to be the case as well. It was a right school for me, the right time, the right size, great staff, great academic experience for me. And it was challenging for me, as I said, because I worked full-time and went to school full-time. Okay, so graduated 85 from here. Started out with Warner Lambert, a company you probably don't know. It really does not exist as it once was any longer. It was back in the day, it was a pharmaceutical consumer packaged goods company that's now been bought out by Pfizer and J&J and some names you may know. And its claim to fame was it created Lipitor, which is the biggest selling pharma product ever launched. It's about a $15-16 billion product for cholesterol. So or to help fight cholesterol. But some of the brands you may know that still exist today are Schick, Lubriderm, Rolaids, Halls, those type of products, okay, Listerine. So that's what Warner Lambert marketed, manufactured, and that's where I started my career. As you can see, I was there 9.5 years, 6 positions. It was a big corporation, relatively speaking, back in the day. It was a great experience for me. Started out in sales, even though my degree was in finance. When I came out to the job market, there weren't many, it was not a good time. There weren't many finance or accounting jobs out there. So I actually started out in sales and progressed all the way up to a business unit manager within Warner Lambert. Then moved on to Cooper Industries. A couple of positions there. When I went to Cooper, realized not only was it a good opportunity, but it would be a more challenging opportunity because it was a turnaround. So I went in there as an executive with the Crosse division, went into a business that was troubled, but again, back to what I said up front, I was interested in the challenge. It was a little bit of a risky proposition. So brought in a whole new management team. We started to turn the business around, and then Cooper thought it would be the right time to exit Crosse, and Cooper was the parent company. And so really great experience for me early on in my 30s. I was involved in a sale process. So we went out and marketed the company to other corporate acquirers or private equity acquirers or venture capital acquirers. And that was a great experience at a very young age. I was a vice president at that point with that business, and we ultimately sold the business to Newell Rubbermaid. So great experience, great challenge, a lot of hard work over those couple of years. Moen, hopefully you know that name, probably one of the more recognizable names up here. It's part of Fortune Brands, pretty big conglomerate. Spent 5 years there. Probably the milestone for me was that was my first opportunity to actually have a full-fledged P&L responsibility. So I became general manager of a portion of the business. It was great learning, great experience for me. The business I was responsible for manufactured most of the products over in Asia. I had never gone to Asia, never stepped foot in Asia. Once I took the job, I was over in Asia moving manufacturing facilities because we had some big issues with our manufacturing base in Asia at the time. So a great learning for me, another step along the way in my career. Then HNI, responsible for 2 larger businesses and some smaller businesses over time that reported into me. Probably one of my bigger challenges there was towards the end of my tenure, the last 3 years, I was responsible for the Hahn business. And you have bought some Hahn furniture in these facilities. I actually saw some today. So Hahn and Allsteel are manufacturers and marketers of office furniture or furniture like you're sitting in. When I took over that business, it was about a $1.5 billion business, about 5,000 employees, and we had a lot of challenges. It was the profit generator for the corporation, had a lot of issues, and I was put in place to help get it in the right direction along with a very talented management team. So great learning there, much larger business, but as I was coming to the end of my tenure with Hahn and HNI, or starting to consider, I should say, moving on, I began to realize that what I really liked, and it took me a while to get to this point, at this point I'm in my 40s, but I began to realize what I really liked was building a business, as opposed to leading a very large organization. Just wasn't as much fun for me, I wasn't as passionate about it. So I was in a great place with HNI. I was number 2 in the corporation, on the track to become CEO, but I realized I just wasn't having as much fun. And so then I pivoted and went to CPG, which was majority owned by a private equity firm, and the management team, including ourselves, had a minority interest in the business. And that was a smaller business, as Dennis alluded to. We had great success. I'm going to touch on that a little later in the presentation. But it was great for me because I went back to building a business with a very talented team. And that's what I thoroughly enjoy. That's the kind of challenge that I like, and I came to that realization a little later in my career. Okay, so that's a little bit about background. I'll say this, and I'll say this multiple times. I think anybody in this room can achieve that kind of success and go through that progression. I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about it. I think it's all in what you want to make it and how hard you want to work. So I'm going to talk about that quite a bit as I go through the presentation, but it's been a great career. And as Dennis said, I moved on in June and working at home right now, and we'll see where we go from there, okay? And by the way, any questions as I'm going along, feel free to just jump in. If it's top of mind, feel free to jump in. We can talk one-on-one if you like. I can take questions at the end, but don't be bashful, okay? All right? So, quick test, quiz. You can't participate in this, Jay, okay? What do these cities have in common? You're not supposed to participate either. He is right. Those are all cities that I lived in, resided in. So over my, almost 30 years now in my career I've lived, I haven't even counted up, about 10 cities there. So started out in a wonderful city in Denver and kind of went backwards a bit and ended up in Scranton at a point in time. But you know, what I did over all those moves is try to find the best in every city and every location. And frankly, a lot of my time was spent at work over those years and in those cities. So point being is, it was a big commitment, but I always enjoyed the opportunity to make that next move, to take on that next challenge, okay? And luckily I had a wife who was very supportive over the last 4 moves especially. I got married a little later in life. So big commitment, but in my case, very worthwhile. So the theme of my presentation is about building it from the ground up, whether it's a business, whether it's your career. A couple things I'd say, and I'm a huge believer in this. Anybody who's ever worked for me, I really do challenge them to make certain they know their business, because you just make better decisions when that's the case. It sounds very simplistic, but I can't stress it enough. So I think people, if they were standing here that have worked for me over the years, and some of the people, I've worked with them now for 20 years. So got kind of a team that we've kind of worked together and moved along as time has gone on. They would tell you that I really do stress getting to know the business. And part of that is I just enjoy, I'm very inquisitive. I enjoy getting to know the business. But even to this day, that's where I enjoy spending my time, is getting to know the business, whether it's the customers, whether it's a manufacturing process, getting to know the employees throughout all of that. And I think that can help build a very powerful team. Okay? So, as I said, I think it leads to better decision making. I am very much the type of person, and I think it's very important as you think about your career going forward, that you should know your details. And as I said, I expect our people to know the details when I'm sitting in the room with them. Okay? And it's okay as you're starting out your career to not know the answer. I respect that more than somebody who's trying to fumble around and answer a question they're just not ready to answer. So I respect that. For me personally, I respect that a lot. Okay? And I think over time, when you take that approach, you form a stronger bond with people, because you're investing the time to get to know their business, because you're spending time working with them. Okay? And I think that can lead to a very powerful team environment. And I've seen it, I guess, 4 times now with 4 different businesses I've been responsible for. Some other things I'd ask you to consider or think about as you go forward whenever you're graduating over the next few years. And I've touched on a bit of this, but I'm going to spend a little more time talking about it. Be very open. My style as a leader, and before I was a leader, was just being very open and honest with people. It's part of how I was raised. So I can't stress that enough. Some of this sounds very simplistic, but I've been in a lot of companies where this is not the case, or had exposure to companies where this is not the case. So be very open to new experiences, to all the moves I made, the different responsibilities. You know, when I took on the role of being general manager of the Moen business, I was excited about it, and candidly, the CEO over the whole corporation said, listen, this is a business that's broken. Kind of just threw me out there. It was kind of one of those good luck. We hope you're successful. And at the end of the day, put together a great team. We had a great experience. Things worked out very well. I just love that type of challenge. Be open to accepting additional responsibility. And the one thing I'd add to that is, don't always expect to get compensated for that additional responsibility. I think that's important. I'm going to argue that the people that accept that responsibility but don't ask about that and don't expect that are probably going to go further than the people that do. Okay? So don't always expect that, and that could go a long ways for you. Talked about the risk-taking. I would call it measured risk-taking or thoughtful risk-taking in my approach. I've gotten better. I'd like to think I've gotten better at that over time. Okay? Be open to diverse thoughts. I know you've probably heard that a lot, but I really have valued that in the 4 businesses I've been responsible for. The way I've led, I've always sought input from everybody on the team. Everybody's treated equally. I don't care if you're the head of HR, if you're the CFO, if you're the general counsel. Everybody's got an equal seat at the table. So everybody has a chance to offer input. We'll make decisions and we'll move fast, very quickly, I should say. But everybody has an equal seat at the table, okay? So as you're starting out your career, be open to feedback. Hopefully it is provided in a constructive way, but be open to that feedback. And then that leads to the next point. I can't stress enough how important having a mentor, relishing having a mentor, taking that input is important. I had truly only one mentor early on in my career at Warner Lambert. And after that, I didn't. And I wished I would have had more, but never really had that mentor on an ongoing basis or for an extended period of time. I can't tell you how important that is, and use that mentor. Gain as much knowledge as you can, ask as many questions as you can. I think it's very, very important. I'd like to think that, again, if people from my team were in here, whether it's the people that reported to me directly or the next levels down, would say I spent a lot of time mentoring. I really enjoy that now, especially over the last 10 years of my career. Door was always open. Had a total open door policy, and when you have that opportunity, seize it, capitalize on it. And to me, the big thing, I don't care what industry you're in today, what product, what service, you have to be very open to and embrace change. And that is hard for a lot of people to do. I've seen that time and time again in my career. That is very, very hard for people to do in a lot of cases, but you have to be. Things move so swiftly, even in a manufacturing environment. The rate of change is significant. So you have to be very open to change. You have to embrace it. You have to help drive change. You have to help capitalize on it when the opportunity presents itself, and it will frequently. Okay, so be open. I'm a huge believer, again, probably overused a bit, but I can't tell you enough how important it is to have a team that works well together. Part of why I left corporate America is I didn't like the politics and, candidly, the bureaucracy, okay? So I left for that reason, as well as the other reason I already alluded to. So building a team that works well together and being part of a team where you work well with your peers is incredibly important. You've heard this probably quite a bit as well. It is about the customer. The customer could be an internal customer or an external customer. And it's amazing how many businesses I've been exposed to that really don't truly understand their customer at the end of the day in a rich way. The businesses I've been involved with all had a distribution element to it. So we would manufacture the product, we would sell to distribution, and then we would help the distributors sell beyond. In the case of CPG, we'd sell to dealers like, I don't know, do you have Wisconsin Building Supply in town here? Lumberyard. So we would sell to distribution that would sell to a dealer, and then a contractor would purchase from a dealer. In that case, what we invested a lot of time on early on was going out and understanding what are the unmet needs of the contractor, what are their pain points. So a lot of research invested in that. Then how do you translate that into meaningful product or differentiated product benefits or services? That's what I mean by understanding the customer. I can tell you a lot of businesses I've had exposure to in that example, they may understand what the distributor needs, but they're 2 mouths removed, if you will, 2 steps removed. So if you really don't understand at the end of the day who your customer is and what they need, and most importantly, what is their unmet need or needs, then you're going to miss a big opportunity. And to this day, I'm starting to look at serving on some boards of some companies and doing some other things as I explore those opportunities. It's interesting when you sit down with the management teams and those organizations don't really truly understand the unmet needs. Okay? So understand your customer, then drive it home in the solutions you provide, whether it's a product or a service. To the next point, it is about the product and the service. I'd like to think with all the businesses, part of why we've had the great success is not only understanding, but launching very differentiated product that drove well above average growth that allowed us to take a lot of market share versus our competitors. And through all that, you reinforce your brand and so forth and so on. You have great momentum. And I'd like to believe that's at the cornerstone of what we've been able to do well as a management team over the years. At the end of the day, I'm going to say it's about the company. A lot of companies will say it's about the employee. It truly is about the employee, no doubt. But if you've got a team that is doing these things and the company is succeeding, it ultimately pays huge dividends to the employee. It opens up a wealth of opportunity for the employees. Okay? Oh, wait, one last thing. I've seen this with a couple businesses, and I'd like to say I invented this. I did not. It was actually a CEO that I used to work for. The big watch out, and I've seen companies go down this path, is success can lead to arrogance, arrogance can lead to complacency, and before you know it, you've lost a lot of market share and you've got a business that's troubled. And in fact, when I took over the Hahn business, that was one of the big issues. They had great success. They were by far and away the market share leader. They had incredible profits for the industry, 23, 24% EBITDA. They had gotten arrogant and complacent, and they had a lot of issues by the time I took on the role as president of that division. So watch out. That's an important learning or lesson. I mentioned this earlier. I'm a huge believer, and you really do have to know your business. Okay? So as opposed to going through this, I'm going to give you, in each one of these points, I'm going to walk you through an example of somebody that I've worked with for the last, I guess, 8 years since I was at CPG. Individual's Mike Gorey, not that I expect you to know him, but when I came to CPG, Mike was in an entry-level sales kind of technical position. Prior to being with CPG, he had an interesting background. When he got out of college, he started a contracting business. Was in that for a few years, then went to do Peace Corps in South Africa for 3 to 4 years, and then came back and had been hired by CPG. So, again, was in a sales technical position. As I was getting to know the business, learn the business, getting to know the people, got to know him, and I saw a great aptitude and a great desire and hunger. So spent some time with him with customers in the field, saw that he had a great technical ability because he had a contracting business, saw that he had a huge hunger to learn. He's a very competitive individual, and saw that he really was a detail-oriented person. So in the case of Mike Gorey, he knew the product because he had worked with the product as a contractor. The one thing he didn't know, and I'll come back to it, is the business environment, because he was pretty young in his career, especially in that type of setting as opposed to a contracting, much smaller contracting business. He knew the customer because he was a customer. He knew the contractor business and he knew the dealer business because he purchased product from the lumber yards. He knew his competition because he had worked with the competitive products as he had worked with ours. And the one thing I really liked about Mike was he spent a lot of time, and we supported Mike in doing this as we moved him up the ladder in investing in research to know his competition, not only knowing what the customers needed, but what were the competitors doing that was compelling? What should we be aware of? What can we learn from it? What can we do better than they can do? Okay? He's the type of person that invested a lot into getting to know his peers. He genuinely enjoyed interacting with the rest of the organization. He loved it. He's very passionate about it. So he's the type of person that really made that investment and therefore was a great team player. Back to the prior slide. He knew his strengths, his weaknesses, his limitations. So Mike went, I guess the conclusion of the story is Mike went from that entry-level position over a 4-year period to heading up all of product, vice president of product development for the whole building products business, which was a very large business of ours. Not only do that, as we went to sell the business, he was one of 2 people that went with me when we made 25 presentations to potential acquirers. We spent, I guess, about a month and a half in New York City presenting to private equity firms and strategic potential acquirers. Mike had earned that because of all of those examples I gave you and because of the traits that I've walked you through. My experience, those are the type of people that succeed and succeed in a big way. Okay? So a few examples, and Dennis touched on a little bit of this, and some of this was in the bio or the announcement, but when I went to All Steel, business had the right strategy, I would say some weaknesses in the team and some weaknesses from a product line standpoint and so forth. Right strategy, good service component, good manufacturing capability, but clearly an opportunity to improve. One of the things, again, they were missing in this case was really an understanding of the end user and decision maker. So we just toured with Jay today, the new, what's the exact name? Student Center. Wonderful building. In this industry, we would supply furniture for that building. And so the way the process works is you work with a local dealer, I don't know who that is in this area, you have to sell to the architectural and design firm and to the facilities people here at UWL. So you have to know the needs of a lot of different people. And in the case of All Steel, they were lacking some of that understanding and therefore didn't always have the right product or service solutions. So we made a big investment in that. Again, as you can see, that's a reoccurring theme, know your customer, and really dissect it. In this case, who are the people that are using the product, like yourselves? So we did a lot of research with students and what provided a more conducive learning environment, but also the people that are making the purchasing decisions and the people that are influencing the purchasing, which is the architectural and design firm. So you have a lot of people you have to understand along the way, and then how do you translate that into a differentiated, value-added product? Did all those things, and I'm leaving out quite a bit here in the interest of time, but we had huge growth, clearly outpaced the market, grew the business specifically by about, what was it, $230 million over that 4 years. There's no acquisitions included in that. That was all organic growth. So we had huge growth, had even more important to the corporation, great success on the bottom line. You can see 140% increase in operating income and grew our return on net assets by a nice 21%. On top of it, during that period, we made a number of distribution acquisitions. One of our big challenges was having good quality distribution in cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, actually Chicago. So we went out, put together a very qualified team that fit within the organization, because guess what? Everybody on my team at that point, they knew manufacturing. They didn't know distribution. So we went out and found somebody who knew distribution in the industry. He built out a team. We went out and acquired distribution, and we made about, another $125 million of revenue-related acquisitions. So we had great growth during that period of time. Comes back to the team, comes back, and I gave the example of the person we put in charge of distribution, comes back to that understanding of those needs. Having the right team, the right focus. In this case, the strategy was sound. Where they were lacking, candidly, another way to put what I said earlier is they were lacking from an execution standpoint. Okay? They weren't in the details enough. They weren't executing properly. That's a lot of what we began to address. They didn't have the right disciplined, kind of thoughtful approach. Okay? CPG International. It's a slide we used in investor presentations and also used actually during the sale process when we were presenting to potential acquirers. So it was an incredible journey. And the one thing I want to say about CPG is we did this during the downturn the most. I went there in 2008, and my first year revenue was starting to slide, and EBITDA was sliding even worse because not only was there a lot less demand, material costs were going up for about a year, which was crazy. I'd never seen that in my career. Usually when you got a, right, certain all of you realize this, when you've got slowing demand, usually you get a break on price. You weren't getting it. It was going the opposite direction. So it wasn't a fun first year, I'll say that. But again, back to unprecedented downturn in the economy, right? Housing starts went from 2.1 million to 500,000. When people kept saying, oh, they'll go down a little bit more, they kept going down a lot more. And they still haven't returned to that 2.1 million starts. So big housing downturn, repair and remodel, so people fixing up their home, was declining as well. So we had a lot of challenges, but through all that, we were able to invest in the right organic growth initiatives and in some acquisitions as well during a tough period. And we had a board of directors and a private equity firm that supported all that. And I can't stress enough, again, in this case, the importance of the team. But let's talk about a few items on this slide first, and I'll dive back into that. I've touched on this a little bit, but I can't stress it enough, even as you go out, even as I was a CEO. If I were going into a business today, I'd absolutely spend at least 4 to 6 months getting to know the business. And I mean really getting to know it. Just as when you enter into your first position, I would strongly urge you to get to know it as well as you can. Ask a lot of questions. Don't be bashful. Don't be shy. For me, I'm more impressed with the people that do that than don't. Okay? So in the case of CPG, I spent a good 4 to 6 months learning the business, learning the industry. In fact, actually, now that I think about it, I started that journey before I even was hired, because when I was thinking about going there, I went out and talked to customers and asked them what they thought of the product. That's the AZAC product, by the way, that you saw on the prior slide. That's a channel brand. You may not have heard of it, probably haven't, but it is. AZAC is probably either the most highly regarded or second most highly regarded brand in building products. Got off the charts net promoter scores with contractors. So very good quality product, highly regarded. Did a lot of homework, spent a lot of time learning the business, learning the key customers, getting to know the key people within the organization, all the way down to hourly people in the facilities. I think that is critically important. I'm not a believer. I've read a lot of books over the years about going in and within the first 6 months, you got to make a bunch of big decisions and make a bunch of moves. I just think, candidly, I don't know how you're in a position to do that at a CEO level. I really don't. So I'm not a believer in that. I know a lot of very talented people that have had probably greater success than I have believe that. That's not how I've ever operated. Throughout that time, as you're going through the learning, obviously you got to drive the business forward. Obviously you're assessing your team. And in the case of CPG, we had to make some pretty big changes in the team. The business, when I got involved, was a few $100 million. It was a family-owned business that had actually pretty strong financials, some fairly innovative product, but I found this time and time again, typically an entrepreneurial-owned, can't say that today, owned and led organization typically doesn't have quite the capabilities to take it to the next level. That's more their sweet spot than focused on growing a business 3 or 4 times, which was our target. So we had a lot of work to do from an organizational skill set standpoint. They really didn't have a strategic plan, so we had to enter into strategic planning in a pretty quick fashion. And as you can see here, we had to make a big investment. I mean, I spent a lot of time interviewing down to fairly lower levels just because I want to make certain that we're getting the right talent in the organization that could take us beyond doubling the business. And back to the Mike Gorey example, finding those people that really had the hunger and the desire to grow and drive their career forward. So I personally and everybody on my team spent a lot of time interviewing, training, mentoring as we're starting to get the business going in a very strong direction. Big thing we addressed here, and really seems like I've had to do it a few places throughout my career, is I said earlier, I'm very open, honest. I expect the same in return from people that I work with, whatever level. I can be walking around on the shop floor and I get some interesting questions. I expect that. I'm glad people feel comfortable enough asking me those type of questions. I think that's very, very important. So this may sound very simplistic, but I've seen this more than once or twice in my career where in the case of CPG, again, family owned, you had a person running it who had a very autocratic kind of style. And there was no two-way engagement. And if you don't have that two-way engagement, I just don't know how you succeed. You really need that. That's how you really can outperform your competitors in the industry and really supercharge a business. So spent a lot of time on these kind of key opportunities, I call it. So as you enter into your career, to me, from my standpoint, based upon what I've experienced, I would absolutely strongly suggest that you learn as much as you can, that you spend the time asking the questions. Don't be bashful about it. Okay? And hopefully you find yourself, and now I'm bragging a bit, in an environment where that's truly valued. Okay? So in the case of CPG, and again, this is during housing starts still aren't back to where they were. R&R has, repair and replace is absolutely continued to grow a little bit now, so that's back to beyond where it was, just slightly. But bottom line is we had huge success with the business. Organic growth, we did do some pretty transformative acquisitions as well, but then really leveraged those, integrated them well. They were very accretive to the business. And then EBITDA, $45 million to $150 million during a challenging period. And then the management team, along with the private equity firm, decided it was time to sell the business. And that was another great learning, a long process. It was about 6 months, right? Calls Friday night till midnight or 1 in the morning. As you're going through due diligence we narrowed it down to 4 potential acquirers, and it was 7 days a week for a long time. We were also integrating an acquisition we had made, which compounded things, and we were moving our corporate office. So there's a lot going on in that 6-month period, but it was an incredible outcome. We sold for about 10 times the money and $1.5 billion, and had a private equity firm that made about 3.8 times their money, so they were real happy. And by the way, you hear a lot of negative things about private equity. I think private equity is great. I think they correct a lot of issues with businesses and industries. But in the private equity world, it is very focused on results. And that's how I'm wired, so it works extremely well for me. And the business continues to chug ahead. Our year ended in September. Another record-setting year, both top line and bottom line for the business. So even though I've moved on, it's built for the long haul. And it's in a great position. If you go back, started out as just a trim company, and you can see that, especially during that down period, 08, 09, we were still adding products, whether it's organic product development or whether it was acquisition related, as I said earlier. So something I'm very proud of, team's proud of. It was a great outcome for everybody. Great success story, great ride. And really, pretty much that whole management team are good personal friends of mine. Kristen loves that. We go on fishing trips every 6 months. And so, great outcome. A little bit about strategy and tactics. I've talked about them, I guess, a bit separately, but kind of link it together. Strategy, obviously, you have to have the right strategy. But to me, the more successful organizations are able to take that strategy, translate it into executable tactical initiatives that are well understood throughout the organization, down through the organization, are in everybody's goals and objectives, and you have great alignment. And through that, you have great power when you have that. And you're able to do all the things that we did in a short period of time to drive the results that we had, both at All Steel and CPG as examples. So I can't stress enough that while strategy is important, and I know it's not sexy and it might be boring, tactical execution is, in my opinion, I'd almost rate as more important. And having that alignment up and down the organization and having the right measurables and making certain that everybody in the organization, even down to the lowest levels, is involved in developing their goals, objectives, and those tactical initiatives. The way I did strategic planning, it wasn't the management team, I have 8 people on my team sitting in a room for a day or two. It was, we'd start off with nearly 100 people in a room. And I'd frame up, what are our issues? What are our challenges? What are our opportunities? And then we'd break up into groups. And each group would be responsible for tackling 1 or 2 of those issues and opportunities. And then out of that, you form a strategy, and then out of that, you form those tactical initiatives. And when you have everybody involved in that way, it's just very, very powerful. And then there's clarity around what you need to do. There's great laser-like focus. Okay? The other thing I'd say is, and I've been in some big corporations as I walked you through earlier, and obviously been in smaller ones down the latter half of my career, and I've already told you where I like to live. I like the smaller and like to build it. The other thing I'd say is, with the organizations that we've built, whether it was All Steel or CPG, we were really focused on trying to make certain we maintained our agility. So as you grow and you add more people, how do you maintain that agility? How do you move fast? As I said earlier, obviously it's incredible, the rate and pace of change. So how do you do that is something we were very focused on. Part of how you do that is you have the clarity, which I just talked about, throughout the organization. I made big investment in my time communicating on an ongoing basis, not only the goals and the objectives and the things that people should be focused on, but the results and how we're doing, how we weren't doing, what do we need to do to improve. Spend a lot of time communicating, whether it's town hall meetings or quarterly newsletters or one-on-one meetings. So you got to make that investment. That's a big part of keeping an organization agile. A big investment in communication. The other part I'd say is keeping it lean. Watch, as I've gone throughout my career, I've really tried to keep it flat, not a lot of layers. You add a lot of layers, it becomes challenging to get things done. Okay? So, some key takeaways. Hopefully you can see I'm very passionate, even though I've left CPG now. I was passionate about CPG and passionate about the career, and as I said earlier, I've gone way beyond where I thought I'd go. So hopefully you can find something that you're as passionate about, because otherwise it's just a job, and that's not nearly as much fun. So really try to find something that you're very, very passionate about as you enter out into the workforce. Okay? Spend a lot of time getting to know your business, your competitors, you name it. Get to know the company, and you will be that much more productive. You'll be that much more valued. You'll have a more robust career trajectory, if you will. Team, it's all about the team, always has been for me. We've had misfires on hiring people, and frankly, when that happens, usually, to be blunt, they don't last long in the organization because it becomes apparent very quickly. The people that are in it for themselves versus the team just have never worked well in any organization that I've been associated with or led. As I said earlier, details are incredibly important. And as I said earlier, I think tactics are probably more important in some regards than the strategy. Making certain you have that linkage, strategy to tactics. I've seen organizations that are very good at strategy, not as strong at linking strategy or tactics and then executing. So again, as an example, I went to Allstate. We had a good strategy. They weren't executing well. So to me, my early assessment after 4 or 5 months in was that was our biggest opportunity. Okay? And celebrate success. This is something I'm still not great at. Okay? But you got to celebrate success. And part of why I'm not great is I'm always looking at the next opportunity as opposed to taking time to celebrate success. So over the years, I'd like to think I've gotten better, but I think most people that have worked with me for 15 or 20 years would say, yeah, maybe slightly, but you're still pretty focused on driving it forward. And that's because I'm very passionate about what I do. Okay? So, a couple of other closing items. As I said earlier, I think UWL is a great institution. It couldn't have worked out better for me going to this school. It's the right size school. Got an incredible business school here for the size school it is. I hope all of you recognize that. So you have a great opportunity going to school here at UWL. Strongly advise you to do internships. We are doing more and more internships at CPG because we're really having a hard time, frankly, finding qualified people that really want to work as hard as I've outlined here today. So what we're spending more and more time, and we have in CPG, when I was there, we had internships with some of the schools in the UW system in our corporate office in Chicago. I can't tell you how important doing that is. So I think it gives you a good opportunity to learn. I think it gives the employer a great opportunity to see what your capabilities are. And my coaching on internships, and I really don't know how it works here, but I can tell you when we did internships at CPG, whoever wanted interns had to come forward and say, here are the 4 or 5 really meaty projects that somebody's going to work on. And so we were always clear as we were interviewing or doing on-campus stuff, here's the stuff that you're going to be involved with. And they were meaty projects because we were a lean, fast-paced organization. So make certain, as you're looking at internships, that you really have an opportunity to work on something meaningful as best you can and not something that's kind of administrative work. And that can be challenging as you're going through the process and looking from the outside in, but I can't stress that enough. Obviously, I'm a believer in summer employment. I mean, I worked full-time all the way through college. I mean, I paid for my college. I know it's a lot more challenging today as tuition costs have gone up and salaries have not at the same rate. So, but Working during the summer and doing all you can, obviously, I think better prepares you for your career. As an example, one thing I forgot to mention up front, when I was at Shopko, working full-time, so I go to school about 8 till noon, and then go work at Shopko 4 days a week from about 1 till 10, work on a weekend day. I do homework from 10 till midnight or 1 a.m., get up and do it in the next morning if I had to at 5 or 6. While I was doing all that, I got promoted early on into a managerial role, albeit retail store, but you were talking about flipping burgers. I got promoted early on to management. And I tell you what, at that young age, I learned a lot about managing and leading. It was a great experience. And that's while I was in college. Okay? So finding something that provides you that opportunity, I think those things do exist. And I think it just prepares you even better for your career. Okay? So if you do want to get to the CEO level, I mean, I get asked that a lot. How did you do it? It's, frankly, I don't think it's anything other than the things that I've outlined here. If you want to have a very successful career, and if that success is defined by achieving a VP, a president, a CEO level, it's going to take a lot of hard work. Hopefully it doesn't take you 10 moves, 10 different cities, but that's the kind of commitment it's going to take. But it's there. I can tell you one of the biggest challenges for our company and for every CEO I talk to, and I've got a pretty wide network, is finding people that are very capable, I see Dennis shaking his head, and have the desire. That is a big, big challenge right now for every. I was just on a conference call. I'm going to New York City for some meetings next week. I was just on a call preparing for it and talking to a few CEOs, and they said it is a huge issue. So you have the capability, you have the drive, you're results-oriented, you have the desire, you're a team player. It's a great opportunity. I think even more so today than it was in the past. And the last one, and I will tell you early on, I thought I had all the answers, and over time I became more open to the feedback, to the input. When you find that mentor, grab onto them. Learn as much as you can. Okay? Get all of it that you can out of that person. So that's it. That's what I've got. Any questions?
There's probably not a class for troubleshooting, but somewhere along the way, you and your boss decided that you were a troubleshooter. When did that occur?
Well, I think, maybe an example would be H&I. That's a long story, too, in and of itself. But the CEO was the person running. The person who got promoted to CEO was the head of Allsteel before I took it over. So it led to some interesting dynamics. But I think he realized from early on that he was very good at strategy. He wasn't the type of president or CEO that wanted to get down the details. As I said earlier, I'm inquisitive by nature. I'm not going to do the work for people that work for me, but I do ask a lot of questions. I keep a lot in my head, so I used to drive people nuts. I'd be, where are we with that? Where are we with this? And I'd just ask them, and then they'd feel kind of on the spot. I never intended it that way. It's just because it was top of mind. And so in that case, with Allsteel, it was a good opportunity, but it had a lot of challenges because they weren't tying the strategy to tactics. So we had great success there. And then the CEO started to give me more small, $100 million-ish businesses reporting into me, the management teams. And ultimately, when Han was in trouble, I think he recognized, I'm not trying to promote myself, but I think he recognized I was probably the right person for the role to go in, because at that point it was a $1.5 billion business. It was about 50% or so, 50 to 60% of the revenue, but it was 75% of the corporation's earnings, and it was a public company. So it was pretty high profile because it was a lot at risk. So I think in that case, I don't know if that answers your question, kind of recognized it through the results at Allsteel, and then started to give me more responsibility, additional businesses, and then ultimately went to take on Han, which was really, the corporation. So, any other questions? Yeah.
When you were working away from your career when you were CEO, what kind of hours were you working on average,
Sure. Question was, starting out the career and then throughout the career, what kind of hours was I working and how did I balance work-life, right? Does that kind of sum it up? I could ask Kristen what Kristen could probably answer that better than I. Listen, that's a big challenge. The way I typically worked was, I guess I'll start with trying to answer your balance question. I think it's a good question. I get asked that a lot. I was the type of person that would work really hard during the week. And I did, as best I could, try to set aside the weekend to kind of decompress, spend time. Kristen might not argue it was always quality time because I'd be looking at my phone or answering an email or whatever, but try to spend time on the weekend decompressing and with the family. But during the week, most of those roles, I was probably traveling at least 40, 50%. And then I'd work in my hotel room at night, getting caught up on stuff. And when I was in the office, it was probably a good, in my case, probably 7 to 7? Does that sound fair? When I was in the office. But if you look at my trajectory, about every 2 years, I was in kind of a new role, even at Warner Lambert. So when you're moving at that pace, it's going to take a lot of hours because you're learning a new position at the same time you're trying to execute. And a lot of the cases, as I walked you through, I was trying to build a team. So it was challenging. I'm not going to lie to you. It is challenging. I'd like to think over the course of the last 5, 6, 7 years, I got a little better at finding that balance between professional and personal. Mike Gorey, the example I gave you, the person I talked about, I don't think he ever did a good job of doing that. And I would coach him all the time. You need to spend more time outside of work. But he was the type of person that I talk about knowing the details. As he progressed, he wanted to know every detail like he was still a product manager. And he's heading up all of product development. You can't do that. So I'd say that's another part of answering the question. As much as I like to understand where we are with the business, you got to start, as you progress in your career, you take on managerial and leadership roles, you got to start to trust in the team around you. You got to communicate the goals and objectives, kind of set the framework, make certain you got the right people on the bus. But ultimately, you can't be involved in every minute detail. And for him, that was a big challenge. So as the business scaled, frankly, towards the end, he was having a harder time scaling with the business because he couldn't let go of that. So I'd say that's another aspect if you move on into those managerial leadership ranks. Get the right team and do it quickly so it'll make your life better. Set the right structure and framework, the right expectations. Communicate on a very frequent basis and then let people run with it. Okay? I don't know if that answered it, but thanks.
So what did you look for when you were building your team? What like personality characteristics? What distinguished certain members?
Yeah, I will. Good question. Some of it I've touched on. So, a lot of times you can tell when someone comes in the door and you spend some time with them. Do they have that big ego or are they really about the team? So really trying to vet out, are they good team players? Or do they have a high level of results orientation? That was big, especially in the latter years with some of the businesses I was responsible for and the pace and the rate at which we were doing things. So I have a high level of results kind of orientation. The big one we really focused on was CPG because we were growing so fast, was could they function in a really dynamic environment and the rate of change that we were going through. That is, with everybody that I know that's involved in private equity, when you're running lean and you're in a very dynamic organization, and a lot of what you do in private equity is you're acquiring, you're bolting on acquisitions, you're asking people to do more with less, you need someone that can really function, but I'd say almost thrive in that and enjoy that challenge. So finding those people, frankly, over the last few years has become a needle in the haystack. So if you're one of those people, I think you could have a great career in front of you because that is challenging to find. Okay? Is that helpful? Okay.
I'm going to follow up that question.
Yeah, quite a bit. Yeah. In fact, one Kristen jokes about Don and I, individuals, Don, name is Don Wharton. We've worked together 20 years now. And Kristen jokes and says, now that you're retired, what's Don going to do? Because Don's 48. He's younger than I am, so what's Don going to do? Don's going to probably have to find his way now, but he'll do great at whatever he does. So, but yeah, that's happened quite a bit. Quite a bit. So I've been lucky in that regard because we're very cohesive, work very well. We can root cause, kind of problem solve and move on to, growing the business. I don't think to the extent we have. And one key thing I was going to mention, and I didn't in the presentation, just registers, you were talking about industries I've been involved with. So I started out my career in consumer packaged goods / pharma, but I was really on the consumer packaged goods side of Warner Lambert. Then went into Cooper Lighting, Kirsch window treatments, then went into plumbing products, then went into office furniture, and now exterior building products. So point I'm trying to make is a lot of what you learn is transferable. It really is. That's not an ego talking, it is transferable. And so I've never shied away from hiring people that came from outside the industry. I'm going to argue, I still hear a lot, relationships are everything. I'm going to argue relationships are good, but if you're not providing value, and therefore you don't have the most talented team, and you're not doing the things I talked about, then those relationships mean nothing. So in most industries, I'm going to argue they're nice, they're still somewhat important, but not as important as they used to be. So I really believe the skills you learn early on are absolutely transferable. I had a great foundation at Warner Lambert, even Shopko, as I mentioned, but Warner Lambert especially. I was on a career development progression path and went into corporate office and did some marketing and product development stints there and came out in an executive role, and that was a great learning for me that I carried forward to this day. So.
You just mentioned your skills, and as a finance major going into sales coming in December when I graduate, I was just wondering if there's anything looking back on your career when you first started in sales, something you don't know, or something from your early on sales career that you carried with you throughout your rest of your career?
Oh yeah, the finance piece, I will tell you, the last 10, 15 years, that's a big part, especially when you're in private equity and you're doing acquisitions and you're going out and, we do acquisitions, we have to go out on a road show, we have to raise debt, and, you're highly leveraged, so you got to pay close attention to the numbers, when you're highly leveraged. Obviously, you can get in trouble quickly. So that fundamental learning in the finance area, and I'm sorry, I'm not repeating the questions real well, am I? Question was graduating in finance, going into sales. Yeah, absolutely, that foundation helped me dramatically. Someone like Mike Gorey's an example. Again, he was great at a lot of things. The one thing we got him coaching on and some developmental classes in was the finance area. He didn't have strength in that area. And as you get up to those executive levels, understanding the P&L, the balance sheet, when you push a lever one way or another way, what does that do? What are the implications short-term and long-term? Having that understanding is incredibly important at that level. So that early fundamental really helped me throughout my career, especially in the latter years as it was a lot around the financials. Okay?
So, as new college graduates, we're going to be facing a lot of different companies with different organizational cultures. And I guess the question is, when do we start looking to join a culture that most fits our values versus a different opportunity that may be better for our learning experience?
Did everybody hear that one? Think we got it? Okay, so as you're graduating, I'll try to do my best here. If I miss something, tell me. As you're graduating, how do you find the balance of finding the culture that fits you versus the culture that provides you the best opportunity to learn and develop? Is that fair? Okay. That's a tough one. It's a good question. Because I'll be candid with you, I'm pretty, from early on, I was the person that I described to you today. So therefore, the culture and the organizations that I was responsible for was that. That makes sense. So I never, again, very open, honest style, very results-oriented. Set a high bar from an expectation standpoint. Was always there though to mentor and help develop people. So we did a lot. I didn't spend time talking about it. It was all on the slides. We invested a lot in people and training and coaching if it was required, because we knew we were asking a lot and we were moving at a fast pace. So, and maybe conversely to that, one of the big acquisitions we made, you probably didn't see it up there, was a competitor. A lot of what we did from an acquisition standpoint was entering into an adjacent category that could help build out our product portfolio and our brand and so forth and our distribution network. We did acquire a competitor, and it was night and day different. There were no goals or objectives in the organization. You may all like this, so I might not be preaching the right audience, but on Friday afternoons they had a Wii tournament every Friday afternoon, and that's not who I am or how we were wired. So we gave all those people some great opportunities. They ultimately weren't able to scale with the business, most of the people, so we had to move on because they weren't everything that I've described. So I don't know, I think probably the answer to the question might be you got to be true to yourself. If you end up in a place that isn't a fit, you probably won't be there long term. And over time, as I said, I got a better understanding of what energized me, what motivated me, where I was the happiest. Go back to the Han example. I realized I liked building. And when you're in a build environment, it's a much more fast pace, unless you're fortunate enough to be early on with Apple, where they have ridiculous margins and the demands aren't as aggressive as they are in my experiences in manufacturing. So I don't know if I have a great answer to that question. I think, over time, you may have it today, understand what you like from a cultural standpoint, and go find that. I will tell you, the people that liked all the things that I outlined or did well in that, they thrived. And there's more than just the Mike Gorey story. There's a lot of people that moved along very quickly. Worked hard, they were talented, but it was a great opportunity for them. So, no, that's a good answer. That's a good question.
Okay, so I would like us to continue the conversation at the no alcohol cocktail hour, for lack of a better expression. But I do want to thank Eric for spending his time with us and giving us some sage advice. And we can talk more about cultural fit and progression through the ranks at the Hall of Nations. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. So let's give him a round of
Glad to be here.
applause.
Thank you.
And also, I have a gift for you,
you.
that I hope you'll enjoy. It's lots of CBA memorabilia. And I have a gift for Kristen. It's the alcohol. We think
even
she
more
needs it. All right. Thank you very much. Come and join us in the Hall of Nations. Appreciate you being here.